Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here again to deliver a lecture, and I thank you for giving me this opportunity. Some of you may be surprised and wonder what an anesthesiologist can know about diabetes. They are responsible for the insulin dosage and diet of a diabetic throughout the treatment. They also take care of the diabetics who are in an ICU. A few years ago, I anesthetized Mr. Jacek. I remember his pale skin. He was 53 and obese. He had diabetes and hypertension. I told him what I know about treating obesity and diabetes. Several months later, I had to anesthetize him again, and I could not recognize him. He was a different man. He had healthy skin. He was a lot thinner. His sugar levels and blood pressure were normal. He told me I should be paid more for what I do for my patients. I felt great satisfaction because I was able to help him. However, at the same time, helping just one man was not enough for me, because many more people can be helped. That is why I am with you today. And I encourage you to listen about the path from obesity to diabetes. I will be focusing on the recovery though. Having BMI over 30 means one is obese. There we have the formula to calculate body mass index. For example, a woman that is 5 feet 4 and weighs 181 pounds is deemed obese. There are two types of obesity, apple-shaped and pear-shaped. It is an important thing. Women whose hip circumference was 39.5 inches and it increased by 6 inches were more likely to die. It was an extensive research. 41,000 people were analyzed. Over 1,000 of them died. These are just numbers, but every one of these deaths means the death of a mother, a wife, a loved one. Few people know abdominal fat means that there is a visceral fat inside the abdomen. Not only does it put more pressure on the joints, but also hinders the functioning of internal organs. It is not commonly known that visceral fat is a hormonally active tissue which releases active ingredients to the blood. These are various substances. Some of them help insulin resistance develop. Others cause inflammation. You could say an obese person is chronically in a pre-septic state due to the number of inflammatory substances circulating in their body. Other ones, such as MCP1, cause psoriasis, atherosclerosis, and other diseases. Angiotensin raises the blood pressure. PAI-1 increases the risk of forming blood clots. It is not a surprise that obese people are more susceptible to diseases and disorders. For example, low self-esteem, which leads to depression. Excessive sweating interferes with their everyday life. Obese people are more likely to have high blood pressure and breathing problems. The latter leads to sleep problems. Diseases and problems with bones and joints make it harder to move. They develop thrombosis, hernia, diabetes, tumors, and stretch marks. They are more likely to have strokes and heart attacks. All of that leads to shorter life. This is a graph from 2009 which shows the prevalence of diabetes and obesity in Poland. It diminishes at a certain point. Why is that? It is because these people die. The rate of prevalence grows until the age of 69, then it slowly decreases. I cannot recall obese 80, 90-year-olds whom I anesthetized.
Praktycznie nie pamiętam też 80-latka czy 80-latki otyłej.
There were some 70-year-olds though. Obesity leads to numerous complications. That is why it should be treated. There are several methods of treating obesity. One of them is diet treatment. Many weight-reducing diet plans exist. Most of them are effective and lead to weight loss after a month or two. However, they are not natural, so the effects do not last. Patients have difficulties with maintaining such diets. When low-fat, low-sugar and Mediterranean diets were compared, it turned out low-sugar diet has the best effects regarding weight loss. Low-sugar diet is also known as high-protein diet. The Atkins diet, the Dukan diet, the Copenhagen diet, they are all highly effective. It is true when we look at the period of 2 years. However, over 6 years, patients gain weight. They cannot follow such diets their whole lives because these diets are not natural. Over 6 years, the Mediterranean diet is the most effective. It is common in the area of the Mediterranean Sea. Why do people often regain lost weight? Yo-yo effect comes into play. It is caused by hormones which work specifically to make one regain lost weight. For thousands of years, humanity struggled with deficiency of food. Due to this, the body aims to regain lost weight. Such state can last for a year. Moreover, if one loses 10% of their weight, their metabolism rate decreases by 15%. The human body strives to protect the energy sources it stored. Diets are not efficient if we look at them from the perspective of a lifespan. What is more, some of them may be harmful. You remember the Atkins diet, don't you? Very efficient and still popular. It is rich in fats and animal proteins, but low in starch. Patients following it grew thinner, but Atkins himself died at the age of 73, so you could say he did not live that long. He had hypertension and coronary artery disease, which led to Atkins having a heart attack in 2002. His diet is not that effective. Overall, high-protein diets are not safe because they can lead to ketoacidosis in healthy people. Such diets may also cause atherosclerosis, osteoporosis and kidney stone disease. One can engage in physical activity. Many people do that without changing their dietary habits. Women who maintained healthy weight and gained less than 5 pounds in 13 years had to exercise for an hour every day to make it possible.
Średnio ćwiczyć 60 minut dziennie. I tak dla porównania, to są te najbardziej aktywne.
For the sake of comparison, women who exercised less or did not exercise at all gained the same amount of weight. Physical activity alone is not enough to maintain healthy weight for the whole life. Following a diet is necessary. Pharmacological treatment is yet another way of dealing with obesity. In Poland you can buy Orlistat, an inhibitor of lipases produced in the digestive tract. To put it simply, it is a medicine that prevents fat absorption in the digestive tract. It has numerous side effects, such as stomachache, diarrhea, abdominal bloating, and bowel incontinence, which may be troublesome. Obesity can be cured with drugs, but it means having to deal with other problems. As an anesthesiologist, I deal with surgical treatment. This picture shows how a bariatric procedure looks like. There are several types of them. We have gastric banding, where an elastic band is placed around the stomach. It stops the patient from eating large meals. Another type is gastric bypass, where a connection bypassing a large part of the stomach and leading straight to the small intestine is made. Food is then digested in a small pouch at the top of the stomach. There is also laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy, very popular in the hospital where I work. It involves a resection of 60% of the stomach. But stomachs of obese people are not the cause of their obesity, don't you agree?
Otyłość, oni nie mają chorego żołądka. To nie chory żołądek każe im spożywać pewne pokarmy. Prawda? Zgodzicie się Państwo ze mną?
Yet 60% of it is removed. This procedure has lifelong consequences. In some patients, there are neurological complications caused by the deficiency of vitamins and microelements. Myelopathy is the most common of them. Its symptoms develop 10 years after the surgery. One may develop cervical myelopathy, which causes hand numbness and loss of feeling in hands. Patients that underwent a bariatric procedure may also develop Wernicke encephalopathy, optic neuropathy, and polyneuropathy.
Neurologiczne mogą dotknąć pacjentów po operacjach bariatrycznych.
Other problems these people may face are deficiency of vitamins B1, B12, A, K, D, E, folic acid, and copper. Despite the supplementation and having normal levels of these substances, people after a bariatric surgery have chronic anemia symptoms.
Objawy przewlekłej anemii po operacji.
Deficiency of vitamin D causes bone demineralization. The lack of zinc leads to hair loss, and insufficient levels of vitamin A cause night blindness. In the hospital where I work, there is a nurse who had a bariatric surgery 6 years ago. She lost a lot of weight, but the level of iron in her blood is 34. Meanwhile, my level of iron is 150, and I am a vegetarian. Normal level of iron in blood ranges from 50 to 170. A few weeks ago, I talked with two women who had been given referrals to bariatric surgery. One of them was 19, the other was 20. According to them, they decided to have this surgery because they had tried every possible way of losing weight, which I doubt.
Schudnięcia i dlatego zdecydowały się w wieku 19-20 lat na operację. I taka moja refleksja.
Let's assume they lose weight and after several years they meet their future husbands. They will want to start a family and have children. If the level of iron during my pregnancy fell from 150 to 94, what are iron levels during their pregnancies going to be? Will they even get pregnant and not miscarry? I also anesthetized a 42-year-old woman who had left her 10-month-old daughter to undergo a bariatric surgery. When my daughter was 10 months old, I was a little overweight, which is completely normal because I was still breastfeeding. It is normal that women lose the excess of fat during the breastfeeding period. I suggest a healthier and longer-lasting solution. The change of lifestyle, not for a month, but for the rest of life. Quality over quantity. 3 weeks of following a moderate protein plant-based diet rich in complex carbohydrates combined with eating until satiety led to the loss of 17 pounds on average in every person that took part in the research.
I okazuje się, że po 3 tygodniach każda z osób, która była na tej diecie, zrzuciła średnio 7,8 kg. Prawie 8 kg w 3 tygodnie. Bardzo dobry.
A very good result, isn't it? Moreover, their cholesterol levels decreased from 193 to 154. Their systolic and diastolic pressures decreased by 11.5 and 8.9 millimeters of mercury accordingly. In another study, over 4,000 people were on a diet rich in complex sugars and fiber. After 3 weeks, body mass of the participants dropped by 5.5%. A person that weighed 220 pounds at the beginning of the research lost 12 pounds, which is a good result as well. According to another study, vegetarians have lower BMI and are thinner in comparison with non-vegetarians. Vegetarian diet does not work if one eats too many sweets, too much cake, pasta or pizza, because they contain processed sugars. Processed foods, complete lack of physical activity, and drinking sweetened beverages also make vegetarian diets ineffective. If someone decides to remain lazy and says they do not mind the excessive fat, metabolic syndrome develops in them. It is a combination of several conditions that increase the risk of atherosclerosis, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular complications. According to research, 10 million Polish people have metabolic syndrome. What is metabolic syndrome, also known as Syndrome X? It means that someone has abdominal obesity, which means waist circumference of at least 37 inches in men and 31.5 inches in women, and has at least 2 of the following issues: problems with triglycerides levels, problems with cholesterol levels involving taking medicine to normalize it, high blood pressure involving treating it, blood sugar level equal or higher than 100, or treating type 2 diabetes.
drugiego lub leczenie cukrzycy, czyli
To put it
otyłość
briefly,
plus
obesity
zaburzenia
combined with
cukru i
abnormal blood sugar
nadciśnienia,
level and high
albo
blood
otyłość
pressure,
plus
or obesity
nadciśnienie
combined with high
plus
cholesterol and high
podwyższony
blood
poziom
pressure.
cholesterolu.
Such
To już
combinations of
jest,
conditions are defined as
to już jest
metabolic
zespół
syndrome.
metaboliczny. Zespół
You could say
metaboliczny to
metabolic
taka
syndrome is like a
trampolina
trampoline with
do
regard to the
cukrzycy
development of
i
diabetes and
jak
atherosclerosis.
do cukrzycy wjeździe przez
Before developing diabetes, one develops insulin resistance first. 95% of diabetics have type 2 diabetes. Only 5% of them have type 1 diabetes.
Typu pierwszego. Proszę Państwa, cukrzyca typu pierwszego i typu drugiego to są dwie
They are two vastly
zupełnie
different
różne
disorders.
choroby. To jest tak samo jak udar słoneczny i grypa,
It is like sunstroke and flu.
temperatura ciała.
High temperature is a symptom in both, but the causes of each of them are different. In type 1 diabetes, there is no insulin in the body. What happens in type 2 diabetes? Insulin resistance is at the core of type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is characterized by the destruction of beta cells in the pancreas, which causes the lack of insulin. What causes insulin resistance and diabetes?
Najszybsza odpowiedź?
It's genes.
Geny.
If you are obese or have diabetes, your parents are to blame. However, I will disappoint those of you who think this is true. Research shows that Japanese American men living in the state of Washington are 4 times more likely to have diabetes than their fathers who live in Japan. What changed when they came to the US? They started eating hamburgers and fries.
Oni po prostu frytki, dokładnie.
Japanese Americans consume more proteins and animal fats.
Spożywają więcej białko i tłuszczu pochodzenia zwierzęcego.
In the last 25 years, the number of Japanese children that have type 2 diabetes tripled.
Ilość cukrzycy u dzieci. I co się w tym czasie zmieniło?
It was linked to the massively increased intake of animal protein and fat in the last 50 years. Is it possible that genes have caused that? It is not. Dietary habits of these people changed. I really like epigenetics. It is a study of heredity unrelated to genes. Epigenetics studies environmental mechanisms that influence heredity and changes in our offspring. A key example of changes studied by epigenetics is the analysis of mice with the agouti gene. This gene makes mouse's coat light and increases the likelihood of obesity and diabetes. Some pregnant females were fed with food rich in methyl groups, while the others were not.
Natomiast drugie nie dostawały pokarmu bogatego w grupy metylowe.
Their genomes were the same. Female mice that ate food rich in methyl groups had mostly healthy offspring, which had a dark coat and suffered neither from diabetes nor tumors. The offspring of the other females had light coat and was more likely to develop diabetes, tumors, and be obese.
Z jasną sierścią, chorujące na cukrzycę i otyłość i nowotwory.
Methyl groups can be found in foods rich in folic acid, for example leaf vegetables. I suppose few people know pot herbs are our main source of methyl groups. Like I mentioned before, insulin resistance is the main problem that causes type 2 diabetes. Insulin is a hormone produced by beta cells of the pancreas. It is responsible for promoting the absorption of glucose to cells by binding to the receptor. When one has insulin resistance, this receptor does not bind with insulin, so the glucose carried by insulin cannot enter the cell.
Dla insuliny. Ona nie może się przyłączyć do niego i przekazać transportowanej glukozy.
This in turn causes the rise of blood sugar level, while the glucose level in cells is low.
Niski poziom glukozy.
What causes insulin resistance? We know it cannot be genes. Let's think about what causes antibiotic resistance. Is the frequent use of antibiotics. A person in the process of developing drug addiction needs higher doses of a drug to get the same effect as time goes on. The same thing happens with medications. So, what causes insulin resistance then? Constantly high level of insulin in blood. Let's look at that problem from a physiological perspective. After a meal, the blood sugar level rises. Then the pancreas releases insulin to the bloodstream, which promotes the absorption of glucose to cells. Insulin resistance rises in people with insulinoma. It is a tumor characterized by a high insulin production. These people can be thin, but their bodies produce so much insulin that they develop insulin resistance. Healthy people given insulin supplements will also develop insulin resistance. People with high insulin levels are more likely to be diabetics. At the beginning, insulin levels are heightened. Only then insulin resistance develops. Let's go back to explaining how it happens. There are two types of carbohydrates. Simple ones, which include glucose, fructose, mannose, galactose, and complex ones. Complex carbohydrates are divided further into oligosaccharides, which contain two monosaccharides, for example sucrose, a combination of glucose and fructose, and into polysaccharides, for example starch, which is built of 1,500 glucose units joined by alpha-glycosidic bonds. Unprocessed starch triggers smaller insulin secretion than highly processed foods. Insulin secretion after eating various meals was compared. The secretion triggered by fine flour was the highest, whereas whole grains induced the smallest secretion of insulin. The more processed the food containing starch and carbohydrates, the higher the secretion of insulin. Higher insulin levels mean higher insulin resistance. Unprocessed foods cause smaller amounts of insulin to be released, thus smaller insulin resistance. The upper graph shows a case of someone who eats sweet snacks throughout the day. It is quite common. Eating a sweet snack increases glucose and insulin levels in blood. Then they decrease because glucose is absorbed by cells. It causes hunger, and so the cycle repeats several times per day. The lower graph shows a case of someone who has 3-4 meals daily. Let's say they ate something unprocessed, so the glucose levels were not overly heightened.
Glukoza nie osiągnęła wysokiego
The levels of
poziomu we
insulin
krwi.
produced by the
I tak
pancreas were
samo
not
wysokiego
exceedingly
poziomu
increased
nie
as well.
osiągnęła wyprodukowana przez trzustkę insulina. Czyli nie
Therefore,
rozwinie się tutaj
insulin resistance will not
insulinooporność,
develop in the
bo
latter
są
case.
długie
It comes
przerwy
down to long
między
breaks between
posiłkami.
each meal.
Osoba, która
If someone
zjada
eats breakfast
o
at
8
8 a.m.,
śniadanie,
then
o
supper at 6
18
p.m.,
kolację,
there is a 14
czyli
hours long
lekki
break between
8,
meals.
6-14 godzin postu, można tak powiedzieć. Prawda? Wtedy,
They
kiedy
eat when
nie ma
insulin levels
podwyższonego
are not
poziomu
high.
insuliny we krwi. A
Say
wyobraźmy
someone
sobie osobę,
eats
która je
breakfast
o
at 8
8
a.m. and
śniadanie
supper at 10
i
p.m.,
kolację o 22,
but they check
a
the
jeszcze
fridge at
zagląda
midnight
do
because there
lodówki
is a
taki
cool
fajny
show
serial,
on and it would be
fajny,
nice to have
sobie,
something to crunch on while watching TV.
pochrupać i jeszcze zagląda do lodówki do 24. Praktycznie
In such a person, the period of low insulin is very short or even non-existent.
nie ma podwyższonego poziomu insuliny we krwi.
High insulin levels lower the sensitivity and number of insulin receptors in cells, which negatively affect the functions of insulin. Cells lack glucose, causing one to feel hungry. It makes one eat something, and it causes the secretion of insulin, increasing the level of it in blood. And so the cycle continues.
Podwyższenie poziomu insuliny i tak dalej, błędne koło. Tak jak powiedziałam,
Just as I have mentioned before, type 2 diabetes means insulin excess.
Drugą taką substancją
Sugar-sweetened beverages also trigger insulin secretion.
Wyrzut insuliny to są słodkie napoje.
Consumption of such drinks was linked to the heightened risk of type 2 diabetes.
Z rozpowszechnieniem cukrzycy typu 2.
This research analyzed women, so if a woman had at least one soft drink a day, she was 85% more likely to develop type 2 diabetes than a woman who had less than one soft drink per month.
Kobieta, która spożywa jeden słodki napój na dzień, ma 85% większe ryzyko zachorowania na cukrzycę.
The worst thing is that sugar is not the only substance used to sweeten soft drinks. Fructose is commonly used in them as well. It causes insulin resistance, which leads to type 2 diabetes. In this study, one group was being given glucose-based food, the other fructose-based food. After 9 weeks, which correspond to about 2 months, people that were being given fructose-based food developed insulin resistance. After 10 weeks, people who were being given fructose-based food gained twice as much fat in comparison to those who were being given glucose-based food.
Prawie 2 razy więcej przytyli niż grupa, która przyjmowała posiłki związane z glukozą. Zwiększyła się u nich
They gained visceral fat, the one that produces harmful substances.
Ten najgorszy, ten produkujący te wszystkie szkodliwe substancje, tłuszcz zgromadził się po
And it happened after having been drinking beverages containing fructose. This graph shows the correlation between the intake of glucose-fructose syrup, represented as the line with rhombuses, and the percentage of American population that is overweight or affected by obesity, shown as lines with squares and X's. There is a correlation. Glucose-fructose syrup is very cheap, cheaper than ordinary sugar. It lengthens the shelf life of food. It makes food look better. That is why it is added to it, including juices. A seemingly healthy juice contains it. Obviously, sweets may also contain glucose-fructose syrup. Even the expensive ones, which we think are high-quality products.
sugerujące, że powinny trzymać jakość. Natomiast tu też słodkie. To jest
There we
pierwszy
have a jar of jam,
jogurt, który wzięłam.
and here is a yogurt. Both have glucose-fructose syrup.
Syrop glukozowo-fruktozowy i to jest wszystko jedno.
It does not matter that it says this syrup was made out of wheat. Cranberry yogurt muesli. The name suggests this product is wholesome, but it also contains glucose-fructose syrup. The amount of fructose found in fruit is too small to induce adverse effects. In fruit, fructose is bound with fiber and pectin, preventing the rapid absorption of it and any adverse effects it would cause. Fructose increases the levels of uric acid in blood, which in turn influence the levels of nitrogen oxide, causing cardiovascular changes. I encourage those of you who are interested in the effects of nitrogen oxide to listen to my lecture titled What We Don't Know About Atherosclerosis. You can find it on the internet. Every increase of uric acid levels in blood by 1 mg per deciliter increases the risk of diabetes by 60%. What is uric acid? It is made from purine bases. Where can they be found? In what particular type of proteins? Animal proteins, so to put it simply, they can be found in meat. Seventh-day Adventists is a Christian denomination widely popular in the United States. Its members can also be found in Poland. They follow the Decalogue version without the changes introduced in years 321 and 787. You may wonder why I am talking about this. Their health attracts the attention of US government. Studies involving Seventh-day Adventists are conducted. They do not drink or smoke. They avoid drugs. Half of them are vegetarians. Conducting research on such a homogeneous group is easy. One of these studies found diabetes developed in 3% of vegan Seventh-day Adventists.
Cukrzyca rozwinęła się u około 3%. Natomiast u tych, którzy
In comparison, almost 8% of non-vegetarians suffered from diabetes. Quite a difference, isn't it? So, non-vegetarians are twice as likely to develop diabetes as vegans are.
Ma o połowę większe ryzyko zachorowania na cukrzycę w porównaniu z osobą, która nie je mięsa. Ale proszę tutaj spojrzeć.
The brown bar represents pesco vegetarians. The prevalence of diabetes in pesco vegetarians who avoid any meat but fish was almost 5%.
Na cukrzycę, to u osób, którzy jedli ryby, cukrzyca wystąpiła u prawie 5%, tak? Osób, które jedli, ryby.
Therefore, fish also influence the risk of diabetes, but not as considerably. This chart shows the influence of fish consumption on the risk of diabetes. There is a 24% difference between people who eat fish often and those who eat fish occasionally. Another research shows that the risk of diabetes in people who ate at least 5 fish per week increased by 5% in comparison to those who ate 1 fish per month. Other study revealed that milk raises insulin resistance more than meat. Yet another study focused on animal proteins, so purine bases and uric acid as well. The blue bar represents the risk of diabetes in people who eat animal products. The red bar, diabetes risk in people who eat plant products.
i roślinne, czerwony, widać było rozpowszechnienie, rozwój cukrzycy. Białko
The
roślinne
difference can be
dodatkowo
seen pretty
obniża
clearly.
poziom insuliny i zwiększa poziom glukagenu,
Plant-based
który
proteins
jest,
lower the levels of insulin and increase the levels of glucagon, which is an antagonist of
w ten
insulin.
sposób zapobiega cukrzycy lub odwraca jej skutki. Dodatkowo to, co wpływa również
Therefore,
insulinooporności,
it prevents
to jest
diabetes
stan
and reverses
zapalny.
its effects.
Praktycznie
Moreover,
trudno znaleźć
insulin
osobę po
resistance
50
is
roku
influenced
życia,
by
która
inflammation.
cierpiałaby na jakiś stan zapalny kości.
It is
Tak?
difficult to find a 50-year-old person who does not suffer from any inflammatory bone disease. I sometimes see these people in hospital, and my son jokingly says it is normal, because healthy people are seldom sent to hospitals. Still, it is proven that inflammatory states promote insulin resistance. But without substrates, inflammation will not develop. Omega-6 fatty acids are an example of an inflammation substrate. Just as a reminder, there are essential polyunsaturated fats, omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids are examples of them. Omega-3 fats are present in linseed oil, evening primrose, borage, and saltwater fish. These fats are a substrate in the production of anti-inflammatory substances. Standard ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fats in diet is 1:4. On the other hand, omega-6 fats are found in meat, dairy products, eggs, sunflower oil, and corn oil. These fatty acids are a substrate in the production of inflammatory substances. In an ordinary person's diet, which lacks vegetables and linseed, the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fats is 1:40. Therefore, inflammatory states are more frequent in these people. Lack of sleep also causes insulin resistance and diabetes. This research proved that lack of sleep increases the feeling of hunger. One group was not allowed to sleep more than 4 hours, whereas the other group could sleep 10 hours each day. People from the first group were hungrier. The levels of ghrelin, which increases hunger, were much higher in people who slept less. Another research showed that 14% of men and 6.4% of women who slept more than 8 hours developed diabetes. To compare, almost 21% of men and 11% of women who slept less than 7 hours developed diabetes. A double increase. Exclusion of external factors that could influence the results of a study is an important matter.
Jakieś czynniki, które mogą wpłynąć, w miarę ujednolicić.
That is why the experimental group must be as homogeneous as possible. What is more, stress causes fat buildup, especially in the abdomen area. Stress causes cortisol secretion, which increases hunger, specifically sugar cravings. This leads to insulin resistance. Someone could say that since life is so bitter, why not make it sweeter by eating something sweet? But this behavior causes health problems. Here we have an interesting study. Researchers invited obese women from a shopping center in San Francisco to psychotherapy sessions. The levels of cortisol in these women significantly decreased after several weeks. During these sessions, the invited women were learning how to deal with stress. I always repeat that life situations are not stressful, but one's reactions to them are.
Ktoś inny na moim
Someone standing where I am standing now would not be able to say a word because of the
nie
stress.
byłby w stanie tego robić ze względu na stres. I dla mnie
It could have been
też
stressful
mogłoby
for
być
me as
to
well,
stresem.
but
Ja
I
sobie
learned how to
nauczyłam,
deal with it.
ja się nauczyłam z tym radzić, czyli
We
musimy
have to learn how to
nauczyć
deal with
sobie
stress
radzić ze
because we
stresem,
cannot
bo
avoid it
nie ma
forever.
życia bez sytuacji stresowych. To, co
Another
jeszcze
factor that
sprzyja,
prevents diabetes and insulin resistance is
chroni
physical
przed
activity.
cukrzycą, insulinoopornością, to są ćwiczenia fizyczne. I to jest takie
It is
bardzo
very logical.
logiczne.
40% of the body is made of muscles. If the only movement you make throughout the day is pressing buttons on the remote, you signal that your muscles and insulin are not needed, since they do not have to do any work.
To jaki sygnał jest dawany? Nie jesteśmy potrzebne, nie pracujemy, insulina nam nie jest potrzebna.
Since your muscles do not work, they do not need insulin, and insulin resistance develops. It is logical, isn't it?
Logiczne? Prawda? Czyli
Physical activity prevents insulin resistance.
zapobiegają insulinooporności.
The harder the workout, the
Natomiast
smaller
im
the risk of
bardziej
diabetes.
intensywny wysiłek fizyczny, tym mniejsze ryzyko zachorowania
If
na
you have the
cukrzycę.
opportunity
Jeżeli
to
macie
exercise,
państwo
do it.
możliwość
Jog
ćwiczenia,
instead of walking,
to
for it
ćwiczcie,
gives
a nie
better
chodźcie,
results.
biegajcie. Tak? Chodzi o to, im bardziej intensywny wysiłek, tym lepsze rezultaty. Kiedy
When
już
someone
dana
has
osoba
diabetes already,
ma
they can be
cukrzycę, co
given
nam
pills.
pozostaje? Tabletki.
There are
Mamy
many
wiele
oral
leków,
medications that cure type 2
ustnych,
diabetes.
leczących cukrzycę
Sulfonylureas
typu 2,
increase
pochodne z
insulin
sulfonylu
secretion,
mocznika, hamują na przykład i zwiększają
but the
wydzielanie
pancreas of a
insuliny.
diabetic already
Trzustkę,
releases
która
too much
aż
insulin.
kilka razy więcej niż powinna wydziela insulinę, ponieważ
It does so
musi
to overcome the
pokonać
insulin resistance in
insulinooporność
cells.
komórek, a to, co
Pills
robią
intensify
tabletki,
this
wyciskają,
process.
żeby jeszcze więcej tej insuliny było. Leki
There are
hamujące
medicines that
uwalnianie
stop the
glukozy z
secretion of
wątroby,
glucose
tak
from
jak
the liver,
metformina,
such as metformin.
również
It also increases cell sensitivity to
zwiększa
insulin.
wrażliwość komórek na insulinę. Leki
Other
hamujące
medications
uwalnianie
stop the
glukozy z
release of glucose
węglowodanów,
from
czyli,
carbohydrates.
to, co
They slow down the
pacjent zje,
digestion.
jest wolniej rozkładane, i leki zmniejszające insulinooporność. Oczywiście
Every medicine has
leki
side
mają
effects.
działania niepożądane.
I will focus on metformin only, which is very effective, but prolonged intake of it leads to vitamin B12 deficiency.
Dawać działania niepożądane i długotrwałe leczenie prowadzi do niedoboru witaminy B12. A z kolei
These changes
wiemy,
cause the production
że
of homocysteine, a very harmful
bardzo
metabolite.
szkodliwy metabolit dostępny, który tworzy się w naszym organizmie podczas przemian, wysoki poziom powstaje przy braku witaminy B12.
Homocysteine causes atherosclerosis, strokes, heart attacks, and thrombotic disorders. Therefore, people who take metformin-based medications for prolonged periods without vitamin B12 supplementation are more likely to become sick. If oral medications prove ineffective for someone with type 2 diabetes, they are given insulin instead.
I taki pacjent z cukrzycą typu 2 zaczyna przyjmować dawki insuliny. Co się
What happens then?
pojawia wtedy? Po pierwsze, przyrost masy
First,
ciała.
their weight
Proszę
increases.
spojrzeć.
In this study, the patient weighed 206 pounds at the beginning.
Miesiące
Their weight
leczenia
increased to
insuliny,
225 pounds after half a year.
stały przyrost
Constant
masy
growth of
ciała.
body mass.
Insulina powoduje.
Insulin makes one gain weight.
Insulina również
It also
powoduje
causes certain
ilość
complications.
powikłań, pewne powikłania.
It
Okazuje się,
turns
że
out
większa
high exposure to
ekspozycja na
insulin
insulinę
raises
zwiększa
mortality
śmiertelność.
rates.
Kiedy
If a patient is
pacjent
being
przyjmuje
treated only with
insulinę
oral
do
medications,
wysnę leki,
mortality risk is equal
jeżeli
to
to
1.
jest jeden,
Low insulin
to
dosage
przy
increases it
niskich
to
dawkach
1.75,
70%,
whereas high
a
dosage
przy
increases this risk to
wysokich
2.79.
czyli o
It is an
179%
179% increase of the risk of complications and
większe
mortality.
ryzyko powikłań, większe ryzyko zgonu.
People suffering from type 2 diabetes are more likely to die from various cancer types, such as breast cancer, kidney cancer, bowel cancer, and bladder cancer.
Rak jelita grubego, rak nerek, rak pęcherza moczowego.
The risk of cancer and cancer-related mortality is increased in the patients who are being given insulin.
Ryzyko zachorowania i zgonu z powodu
It is larger
nowotworów
than in
wśród
those who
pacjentów
take metformin
przyjmujących
or
metforminę
sulfonylureas.
czy pochodne sulfonylomocznika. Czyli
So we
mamy
start
dwa
with
stare
oral
liczyć.
anti-diabetes
Szczycowe,
medications.
insulinę.
If they fail,
Coraz
the
większa
patient is
dawka
being given
insuliny, bo
insulin.
mamy cały czas
If it is
insulinooporność.
ineffective in overcoming insulin resistance, insulin dosage is increased. Sadly, with time, complications develop. I took these photos on Thursday. Mrs. Dorota, a 49 years old patient. One of her legs and some parts of the other leg and hands had to be amputated.
Częściowo drugą nogą, a ja ją
I anesthetized her before the amputation of her finger. This photo was taken a month ago. It is a patient with a bed sore. Bed sores are more likely to develop in diabetics.
Na cukrzycę częściej rozwijają się odleżyny.
As I have already said, diabetes leads to strokes, heart attacks and blindness. Mrs. Dorota is chronically dialyzed. She is taking 11 medicines, including insulin and antidepressants. It is not surprising she suffers from depression. Is there a light at the end of this tunnel? Can type 2 diabetes be cured? If it could not, I would not be here now.
Odpowiedź brzmiała nie, nie byłoby mnie tutaj.
83% of patients who underwent bariatric procedures such as gastric bypass had their type 2 diabetes cured.
Pacjentów zostało wyleczonych z cukrzycy typu drugiego.
There are more studies like that. I do not talk about every single one of them due to time restraints. I show one research to make you aware of certain things. Another research revealed that sleeve gastrectomy lowers insulin resistance. Its level is expressed by HOMA-IR index. It turned out insulin resistance decreased in patients who underwent this procedure. Here's a graph that shows it. A study from 2012 analyzed 150 people whose type 2 diabetes was being treated incompetently. Some of them underwent a surgery, either a gastric bypass or a sleeve gastrectomy, and they did not have to take as much anti-diabetes medications as they had to prior to the surgery. Their levels of glycated hemoglobin lowered. The same thing happened with their level of glucose measured before breakfast. Moreover, their BMI decreased. They simply lost weight. An interesting study focused on patients who were in the process of preparation before a gastric bypass procedure. They were advised to start a diet before the surgery. They followed a strict diet, which led to significant weight loss. Diet alone made the patients lose 15 pounds, whereas after the procedure, they lost 9 pounds. Glucose levels before the surgery were lower than after it. Therefore, diet and breaking the cycle of insulin resistance cures diabetes. In this study, people had to follow a strict diet for 8 weeks. They were not allowed to eat more than 600 calories daily. It is very little, of course, but the point is, it normalized beta cell function.
normalizacja komórek beta-3
They started working normally.
swoją pracę.
The amount of fat in the pancreas and the liver lowered as well. Disorders that are the main causes of type 2 diabetes can be reversed by lowering caloric intake. This chart shows it. The effects are immediate and lasting. They start appearing within a week, and they last for 8 weeks. In yet another research, 2 diets were compared. One group had to eat 541 calories each day for 2 days. The other ate 1,498 calories daily for a week. So the first group ate normally for most of the time, and they fasted for 2 days, whereas the other ate relatively little, but it was not a starvation diet. Insulin resistance decreased more in the group which lowered their caloric intake just for 2 days. These charts show it. During the second day, the levels of triglycerides lowered and insulin resistance decreased. That is how it looks like in a longer period. Intermittent fasting has better results than a moderate diet.
Umiarkowanej ilości kalorii w diecie.
In another research, people were divided into 3 groups which followed a diet for 15 weeks. The first one had a diet with 1 day of fast each week. For the rest of the time, they ate around 1,500 and 1,800 calories. The second one had to fast for 5 days, which is hardcore, but they did that every 5 weeks. The last group followed a constant, moderate diet, in which they ate around 1,500 and 1,800 calories daily. People from the second group, which fasted for 5 days every 5 weeks, lost the most weight. People who fasted 1 day each week lost a little less weight. Results in the group that followed a moderate diet were the worst. However, diabetes can be cured with less extreme methods. There is a study that analyzed 3,000 patients with heightened glucose levels measured before breakfast and after a glucose ingestion. So it was not diabetes yet, it was metabolic syndrome, the trampoline I have mentioned before. There were 3 groups. The first one was informed about the diet and given placebo. So they told them to lower sugar intake and drink water instead of soda. The second group was also informed about the diet, but they were given 850 mg metformin pills to take twice each day. People from the last group had to attend meetings each week. They were given some recipes for healthy meals. They exercised with professional trainers and attended psychotherapy sessions.
Ćwiczono z nimi, te osoby miały osobistych trenerów, miały również zajęcia z psychoterapii.
They followed a low-fat vegetarian diet. After 3 years, 11% of the people who were given placebo developed diabetes.
U tych osób w tej grupie cukrzyca pojawiła się u 11%, czyli 11 osób na 100 rozwinęło cukrzycę.
There were 31% less people who developed diabetes in the group that had been given actual medicine than in the control group. Almost 8% of them developed diabetes. 7.8% to be exact.
Osoby na 100 rozwinęło cukrzycę.
People from the last group worked the hardest. They had received no medication. It resulted in 58% less cases of diabetes in this group in comparison to the control group. What does it mean? About 110 people from the first group developed diabetes, whereas only 50 from the third group developed it.
50, tak? Prawie 50, tak? Przekładając na 1000. Co to znaczy?
Twice as many people more likely to lose sight, be dialyzed daily, and suffer because of diabetes. A set of drastic changes in one's lifestyle can prevent all that. In another research, 25 people with type 1 diabetes, which is incurable, and 25 people with type 2 diabetes were analyzed. Both groups were receiving insulin injections. They had to follow a moderate diet for a week. Then, for 3 weeks, they were on a diet based on unprocessed plant products and plant equivalents of meat, so lentil, chickpea, and soy. In patients with type 1 diabetes, insulin doses could be lowered by 40%. Moreover, their cholesterol levels dropped by 30%. In 24 out of 25 people with type 2 diabetes, the pharmacological treatment was deemed unnecessary.
Można było przerwać stosowanie leków.
One of the patients had diabetes for 21 years and took 35 units of insulin daily. After 3 weeks of diet, 8 units of insulin were sufficient. After 8 weeks, he no longer had to take any insulin. Another study examined 40 people with type 2 diabetes who had to exercise and follow a vegetarian diet for 26 days. 34 of them stopped taking medications after finishing the diet. Those who continued the diet maintained the beneficial effects of it. Diabetes causes dangerous complications such as strokes, heart attacks, high blood pressure, and kidney failure. It also interferes with everyday life because it causes polyneuropathy. It manifests symptoms such as hand and feet pain. I remember one of grandmothers from my family who had diabetes and complained about hand pain. She wanted me to do something about it since I am a doctor. Studies show a plant-based diet can help with diabetic neuropathy. It increased electrochemical skin conductance. The point of that is you cannot measure pain because it is a subjective reaction. In this research, scientists attempted to make these results as objective as possible by measuring electrochemical skin conductance.
Skóry właśnie ocenić poziom neuropatii cukrzycowej.
In the next research, 21 patients with type 2 diabetes and diabetic neuropathy were analyzed. They started a vegetarian diet based on unprocessed products. In 17 patients, the symptoms disappeared between the 4th and the 16th day of the diet. Less than 3 weeks were enough. Half of them had their insulin doses lowered. 5 of these patients were allowed to stop taking medications altogether. The neurological state of patients who followed the diet for a longer period was constantly getting better. It is said diabetics should avoid carbohydrates and eat proteins instead. Here is a chart with some statistical data. Green bars show the percentage of fat intake, yellow bars, unprocessed carbohydrates intake, and red bars, the number of diabetes-related deaths. In Japan, food containing unprocessed carbohydrates is widely popular. At the same time, the number of diabetes-related deaths is the lowest in Japan. Maybe it is not about carbohydrates themselves, but about their type. In the last research, 2 groups of people had to eat no more than 500 calories per day, a very strict limit. One group followed a vegetarian diet, the other one, non-vegetarian diet. The same restrictions, the same amount of calories per day. 43% of people who were on a vegetarian diet were allowed to take smaller doses of medications. To compare, the same could be done only for 5% of those who followed a standard anti-diabetes diet. A strict diet based on plant products is more effective in curing insulin resistance than a standard anti-diabetes diet. It is not just about losing weight, getting slimmer, and lowering cholesterol. These charts show the decrease in the levels of glucose and the amount of subcutaneous and abdominal fat. Moreover, the levels of vitamin C in people who followed a vegetarian diet increased. Superoxide dismutase and glutathione are substances that indicate the improvement of antioxidant potential in the body. They protect from atherosclerosis, tumors, and disorders. If anybody still doubts the effectiveness of vegetarian diet, take a look at these photos. They illustrate the changes in coronary arteries after 32 months of vegetarian diet. This patient did not take any medications to lower their cholesterol levels. This patient was a 44-year-old surgeon who worked in the hospital where Dr. Esselstyn conducted his research. More photos like these were taken. All of them indicate that changing the diet was enough to widen the arteries. Calories can be different depending on their source. A chocolate bar has 212 calories, whereas a pound of plums has 230 calories. The number is almost the same, but these calories are different. First of all, it is hard to eat so many plums, because they satiate hunger well. Moreover, plums contain microelements and vitamins essential to one's health, which sweets do not contain. Here is a figurative analogy. It is a graphic representation of 400 calories from fat, chicken, and vegetables. In the last case, the stomach is full and hunger is satiated. I would like to point out that plants contain chromium, zinc, and manganese, which control the blood sugar level, and silicon, which helps the pancreas function properly. Highly processed food lacks these minerals. In the production of white sugar, white flour, and refined salt, these essential elements are removed. This is my favorite chart. If we assume that a roll made with whole wheat flour contains 100% of zinc, magnesium, vitamin E, folic acid, chromium, vitamin B6, and fiber, then the total calories of a roll of wheat flour contains 100% of zinc, magnesium, vitamin E, folic acid, chromium, vitamin B6, and fiber. If we assume that a roll made with whole wheat flour contains 100% of zinc, magnesium, vitamin E, folic acid, chromium, vitamin B6, and fiber, You would need 5 Kaiser rolls made with white flour to provide equal amount of zinc, magnesium, chromium, vitamin B6 and fiber. 20 such rolls provide as much vitamin E as one roll made with whole wheat flour.
Którą mamy w bułce z pełnego przemiału.
The greatest disrespect a doctor can show to their patient is not telling them about the possibility of saving their life because the doctor thought the patient would refuse. I can anesthetize patients, and I do that for the time of a surgery and for the period after the surgery. But I cannot anesthetize anybody for the rest of their lives. My work is about accompanying people in their suffering. That is why I give these lectures, to prevent the pain. I give these lectures so that I will not have to meet you or your relatives on an operating table. I give these lectures so that I will not have to meet you or your relatives on an operating table. To sum it up, type 2 diabetes can be treated with oral medications and insulin, which do not prevent any possible complications. It can be cured with bariatric procedures, which I do not encourage, but also intermittent fasting and vegetarian diets. I want to remind you that pharmacological treatment can be stopped only after consulting a doctor and changing the diet radically. Your body carries you throughout your life. It always makes me think of 2 patients of the same age whom I anesthetized on the same day. One of them had appendicitis. The other, Mr. Antoni, had already been through many surgeries. I had anesthetized him 3 times prior to that operation. He was obese, had diabetes, which caused kidney failure. He had been dialyzed multiple times. He also had heart failure, hypertension, and coronary artery disease. During every operation, a part of his body had to be cut out. What was the difference between these 2 men of the same age? The respect they had for their bodies. Mr. Andrzej took care of his body, whereas Mr. Antoni would always say that he eats just like everybody. So both cars are old, but their condition is different.
Jedno auto jest stare i drugie auto jest stare, ale w jakiej kondycji?
Only we are responsible for whether our journey ends abruptly or it lasts for a long time. Nobody can go back and start a new beginning, but anyone can start today and make a new ending. This is what I wish you. We can start today and put these things on our plates, which will lead to a bitter end. You can also put these colorful things on your plate. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. If any of you are interested, I will send you an email with my vegetarian recipes for meals that I eat every day. As I always say, I am a hard-working woman, and I simply do not have time to spend hours in the kitchen. Thank you for your patience and for your attention.